No,
But
I missed it.
that's based on like influences that are kind of trapped in that particular region of the brain, right? And that region is called what again?
This is the reticular activating system.
So the reticular activating system. So is any of that like, however that's shaped, is that now becoming hereditary? Can that like transcend into like your offspring? If your brain is like shaped in that way, or it's functioning that way?
Part of this is, they think, due to our belief system, and
Okay.
beliefs are directly passed down from generation to generation.
Right.
And it creates something in your brain called the belief bias. And your brain will never take in information that it does not believe to be true. And I mean, look at the politics right now. Look at all the things that people fight over to such massive degrees.
Okay.
When they're getting the same pieces of information, one set of beliefs sees it one way, another set of beliefs sees it another way, and no one can ever override your belief bias except you.
Yeah, but I'm trying to understand, does that like adjustment and manipulating of the brain, does that get passed on through generations through genetics at all?
It can. And the new field of epigenetics is showing that it actually is altering your DNA. And epigenetics means on top of the genes. And so if you think about it like a little zip tie, and it sits on top of the DNA helix and either squeezes it and turns it off, or opens it and turns it on. And so that cancer, diabetes, obesity, there's several things that they now know are linked to your epigenetic markers or epigenetic tags.
So your mindset might affect your future health or the future health of your offsprings.
Absolutely.
Your future, the future physical health, not just mental.
Yes. And it can be passed down from generation to generation. And they did a fascinating study with these agouti mice. And for people that don't know what agouti mice are, they're these little fat mice, and they're kind of like yellow and white.
Okay.
And they went in and changed that epigenetic tag on the agouti mice. That's all they did, is alter the epigenetics. So the next generation of agouti mice, not only were they not fat, they altered their color and were now little brown gray mice.
By just changing what's happening in the brain.
Alter that little epigenetic tag. Yes. And then the future generations of those mice were also little gray, brown, skinny mice, not fat, little yellow and white mice.
That's kind of what, so you mean, so you could like reproduce little LeBron Jameses if you alter, if you alter that part of the brain in the genetics of the next generation, right?
It's possible.
So I imagine that belief systems can be passed down through genetics.
Oh, absolutely. They know that hatred, because it's such a volatile belief, and it alters the chemicals in your brain, and is also one of those epigenetic tags.
That is wild.
Can be passed down from generation to generation to generation.
So you know what I'm thinking of, right? Like, so now I'm thinking about like the concept of racism, right? How like for so many generations, people have cultivated the idea of like suppressing people based on skin color or even just like socioeconomic standards, right?
Right.
You're telling me that even if we push the ideals of creating more synergy amongst people and less bias, you're telling me we still have to cope with the genetic racism, right? Where people are born racist or born to have like these ideals because of genetics that were passed down
from generation to generation.
Really?
And I don't necessarily know that they would say you're born as a racist.
I'm not saying that, but I'm saying there's some contribution.
You're born with an epigenetic tag or marker that influence the way your DNA works. And the new research is showing that thoughts alter epigenetic tags.
So if I have a certain thought pattern, right? Like if I'm super analytical, right? Let's just go basic. I'm super analytical. I like math. I mean, those are facts of me, but I like math. I like science, and I'm very like nerdy and stuff like that, right? When it comes to stuff like that, like, you know, science. But if I have a lot of that being filtered in my brain, right? Through the, how do you say it again? I want to make sure I'm saying
the filtering system is the reticular activating system.
The reticular activating system is being manipulated over the course of my life. And then if I if I have a child and they carry my genes, that thought process could potentially carry into the next generation just automatically without even nurturing that into them.
Possibly.
I mean,
that's what's so fascinating about brain research is that the technology has now caught up to the place where we can see inside a living brain.
Yeah.
Where before the only way you could look inside a brain was if someone had, deceased or passed away. Now that we can see a living brain, we can see blood flow, we can see where the electromagnetic signals are going. We see what's happening in a human brain. And the book, if you want to read an awesome book, it's called The Genie in Your Genes. And it's by Dr. Church, and he's an epigenetic specialist. And he talks about all these fascinating studies that things that we never dreamed of could be part of our DNA are actually thoughts, belief systems, as well as abilities and physicality.
You know what this makes me think of, right? So when there are certain like people that want to have like sperm donors as like the people that, help them get pregnant if they want to do it through a sperm donor. If like, let's say their man has a low sperm count or whatever the case may be, or they have like some health issue, or they don't have like a man and they want to get a sperm donor and they want to select who they get their sperm from. Like, if they're Harvard grads, you know what I mean? Like if they're like really smart. I always thought like that was just a bit of a hoax. Like, okay, yeah, you can get the sperm of anybody. And as long as you raise the kid to be whatever you want them to be, and you're the proper influence, that kid has the potential to be anything, right? But what you're saying is if the mindset of the person is in a particular way, my offspring through sperm, if I were to donate a sperm, right, how that person is when they're born is a reflection of who and how I was, regardless of, I don't want to say regardless, but it has an impact on top of the nurturing that happens, right?
Okay.
So
according to epigenetics, that is possible.
So only very intelligent people who are potentially wealthy through self-made procedures should donate sperm. Yes?
I don't know about that.
No? Okay, I'm being a little biased.
But I think it's important for people to understand that science has never been able to say that it's more than 50-50 nature nurture. And, that battle's been going on forever, and people have tried to prove, it's more one than the other.
Yeah.
But they're still at 50-50. So that nature is part of that epigenetics and part of what could be passed down from generation to generation. Not saying that you can't, if let's say you were born into a family that is full of hatred and bias and yuck, not saying you can't change that. Because I was born into a family of alcoholism, and I changed that for my family.
Huh.
So it can be changed. You're not stuck with what you've got, but there is a possibility that epigenetic tags are passed down for up to 6 and 7 generations.
Wow. So you come from a family of alcoholism. So what does that mean exactly? Like multiple generations of like everyone was an alcoholic, or there's always someone in a generation that's an alcoholic?
Then almost every person on my dad's side of the family has had some form of addiction. My granddad was very, very successful doctor, back in the early days, but was an alcoholic. My dad was an alcoholic. My brother was an addict. and died of a drug overdose.
Oh, I'm sorry to
and
hear that.
we lived in the same house with the same parents in the same town. And that's what began my study into what your brain is doing, because I always wondered what made him feel like he needed something to cope with life.
Yeah.
And I got stubborn. And why was I stubborn and he felt weak? And
Yeah.
I knew it was something more than just how we were raised. I knew it was something different.
So what did you personally do to kind of like pivot away from what your genetics were going to naturally draw you to if you were genetically predetermined to be addicted to something that was abusive?
And I don't know that people are genetically predetermined. They can't, they haven't proven that by any means. But
I
you
thought that was the argument you're making about like the things that are happening in your brain could be passed down from generation to generation.
Can be. That's the important word.
Okay.
Can be.
Okay.
So it doesn't mean you have automatically that's your predisposition. Yeah.
Okay.
So I want to make that clear. That doesn't mean if your family's obese, you're just doomed and you might as well eat cheeseburgers for the rest of your life. Like there's always nature, nurture. You can 50-50 yourself. Or Dr. Jerome Luby, which is one of my favorite neuroscientists, he says there's actually a third component. So it's nature, nurture, discipline. And that's the one I use most often, is I discipline myself into altering and reshaping brain patterns that are very predominant for me, my family, my genetics, or even my behavioral history. And you can discipline your way into shifting the way your brain works. And that's what I think is the most important thing for people to understand. Who you were does not have to be who you become. You can do anything.
I believe in that wholeheartedly, but are you at a lesser advantage if you are an offspring from a family that has generations of just trash people who didn't amount to anything? They didn't think beyond their, close surrounding. Like, are you somewhat at a, bigger disadvantage?
I personally think so. Yes.
But is there science behind it that says that you potentially are?
Yes. I think depending on, again, which pieces of science you look at, what part you feel is the most important, but there is definitely new research showing that genetics plays a huge role in how your brain works, how your emotional systems, those are things you learn from your family members. If every person in your family, your grandparents, your parents, your aunts and uncles scream when they get mad, it's much more likely you will do the same. If they hit people, I
know, but if you're witnessing that, yes, but if you never witnessed it, right? Would you be susceptible to having that type of behavior if you never even witnessed it, but you came from a line of people that did that?
According to epigenetics, that is highly possible. That is not my personal expertise at all. I've read bunches and bunches of books.
Got it.
But it is definitely something that science is looking into because of identical twins. Looking at the things that are the same and the things that are different. And how those similarities, even when they were raised in completely different countries, how they are similar, and how is genetics playing a role in that?
That's crazy. I think there was a special one, something like that. Like they were like triplets or something that were like raised in separate in
different places
and brought back together as an experiment. It was, I don't remember what it was called, but I've been meaning to see that. I just forgot what it was called. If anybody knows what it is, leave it in the comments, unless you know what it is. I'm not sure what it is.
I don't know either, but we looked at several of those studies in grad school about people that were, separated at birth for whatever reason, or maybe adopted into two separate families. And that mindset plays a huge role. What you are raised with, so that would be your nurture, as well as nature. What were the similarities in these people that had absolutely never even met one another until they were elderly women?
Wow.